That shed is illegal. Tear it down cheeking or pay $500 a day.
HOA president, Belinda Thornberry, smug clipboard, $300 highlights, waved my city-approved permits in my face like garbage. City okayed it. HOA approved 4 months ago. Inspections passed. She lied. Rules changed. Tapping fake nails like a mob boss. That little 8x10 shed held everything left of my late wife Sarah. Her rose clippers, our Christmas ornaments, gloves still carrying her scent. My last place to feel her near. She was erasing Sarah's memory for a power trip. What would you do if someone tried to destroy your last connection to the one you loved? Ever dealt with a Karen like this? Drop your story below. Team Revenge Unite. So I tore it down the next morning. What I built in its place. Let's just say when Belinda saw the final result, her face was absolutely priceless. You won't believe what happened next. My name is Dan Kowalski, and I moved to Willowbrook Estates to escape one nightmare. I had no idea I was walking into another. 3 years ago, cancer took my wife Sarah. 68 houses, manicured lawns, community pool. This suburban paradise was supposed to be where a broken-hearted structural engineer could rebuild. Sarah always wanted a garden workshop where she could teach neighborhood kids pottery. I bought the corner lot thinking I'd honor her memory, restore motorcycles, build furniture, maybe teach woodworking like she always encouraged. The smell of sawdust and motor oil became my therapy ritual every morning with coffee. So I built a simple 8x10 storage shed for her tools, rose clippers still sharp, clay pots stacked like prayers, work gloves carrying the ghost of lavender lotion. Her Christmas angels lived there too, ceramic faces watching over everything we'd built together. HOA architectural approvals, once granted in writing, create grandfathered protection under most state property laws. Save those approval emails, they're legal armor. I did everything right. Permits pulled, contractors licensed, HOA approval submitted 4 months early. Rodriguez, the city inspector, called it model compliance. Then Belinda Thornberry decided my grief was an eyesore. Picture a real estate Barbie. Blonde bob worth $300, designer athleisure at 9 a.m. BMW X, 5 shinier than her fake smile. She rules the neighborhood from her 4,200 square foot corner palace like a suburban dictator. Our first meeting was an ambush. I'm reading peacefully by the pool when she approaches, clipboard in hand like a weapon. Dan, sweetie, she coos with venom-laced honey. That adorable little shed is really impacting our property values. The architectural committee might need to revisit certain approvals. I showed her my permits and her own signed email approval. Her mask cracked instantly. Rules evolve, Dan. Some of us have serious investments to protect here. She glanced at my decade-old pickup with obvious disgust. Not everyone understands what maintaining standards means. The threat was crystal clear. Conform or get crushed. That evening, neighbor Chuck Rodriguez filled me in over beers. Brother, you just painted a target on your back. She's driven out 3 families in 2 years. Always finds violations, always has complaints. But the permits are ironclad, right? Should be. But Belinda's been HOA president 6 years running. She knows how to make life hell until people surrender. 2 weeks later, the harassment began. 7 a.m., gravel crunching under Inspector Rodriguez's truck. He climbed out with apologetic shoulders and tired eyes. Dan, I hate this. Someone reported your shed for setback violations and illegal square footage. I know it's bullshit, I signed off myself, but I have to re-inspect. Who called? Can't say officially, but he glanced toward Belinda's house. I get complaints from that address weekly. Last month, a basketball hoop was apparently a neighborhood safety hazard. 5-minute inspection, perfect measurements, valid permits. Rodriguez shook his head in disgust. Whoever's filing these false reports is wasting taxpayer money and harassing innocent residents. That night, standing beside Sarah's shed in the fading light, I felt something shift inside me. This wasn't about building codes or property aesthetics. This was about power, about a woman who saw a grieving widower as easy prey. The scent of evening roses mixed with motor oil from my garage, same combination Sarah loved during our weekend projects. I could almost hear her voice. Dan, some bullies only understand one language. Belinda Thornberry thought she was dealing with another broken old man who'd roll over and disappear. She had no idea she'd just declared war on a structural engineer with 30 years of building experience, intimate knowledge of municipal codes, and absolutely nothing left to lose. Her first mistake was thinking grief made me weak. Her second mistake was not knowing what engineers do when someone tries to tear down what we've built. The violation notice arrived on a Tuesday, certified mail with Belinda's signature flourishing across official HOA letterhead, like a declaration of war. Notice of covenant violation. Immediate compliance required, $500 fine, 30 days to remove unapproved exterior modifications. The same shed she'd approved 4 months earlier, now suddenly transformed into a neighborhood menace through the magic of bureaucratic gaslighting. I sat at my kitchen table reading her accusations while sipping coffee from Sarah's favorite mug, the ceramic one with "World's Best Gardener" painted in fading blue letters. The irony wasn't lost on me. Belinda was trying to erase the last physical space where Sarah's memory lived. That's when I remembered something my old law professor used to say during my engineering degree's required legal studies. Most people don't know that authorities can't just change their minds after you've relied on their approval. It's called estoppel, and it's your legal shield. I'd filed that knowledge away 30 years ago, never imagining I'd need it to protect my dead wife's garden tools. I spent that weekend in full engineer mode, spreading documents across my dining room table like battle plans. HOA covenants, state property law, municipal zoning codes. The smell of old paper and fresh coffee filling the house as I discovered something beautiful buried in Section 12.3 of the original covenant. Any structure approved by both city and HOA gained permanent protection against future rule changes. Grandfathered protection, ironclad and untouchable. Belinda had just handed me a legal sledgehammer, but as I researched deeper, cross-referencing property records with permit databases, my engineer's eye caught something else, something that made me smile for the first time since Sarah's funeral. Monday morning, I filed my own complaint with both city and HOA. Belinda's deck extension, built in 2017, never received permits from anyone. 400 square feet of unpermitted construction attached to the HOA president's house. Rodriguez called Tuesday, barely containing laughter. "Dan, you magnificent son of a bitch. That deck she's got? No permits, no inspections, no HOA approval. She's been signing off on everyone else's projects while sitting on the neighborhood's biggest code violation for 6 years." The sound of Rodriguez's delighted chuckling through my phone speaker mixed with the morning bird song outside. The same peaceful soundtrack that used to comfort me during grief. Now it felt like a victory march. Wednesday brought Chuck over with beer and neighborhood intelligence. "Brother, Belinda's been making calls all day. Heard her through the fence, screaming at someone about harassment and targeting. Her voice was cracking like a teenager." Thursday, she appeared at my front door. Gone was the fake sweetness from our pool encounter. Her $300 highlights looked frazzled, makeup smeared like she'd been crying. The clipboard shook in her manicured hands, and I could smell the desperation rolling off her expensive perfume mixed with fear sweat. "Dan, we need to talk." "About your illegal deck?" Her face flushed crimson, spreading down her neck like spilled wine. That's different. That's grandfathered construction. Grandfathered requires original permits, Belinda. You know, the same permits you're claiming don't protect my shed." She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a panicked whisper. "Look, maybe we got off on the wrong foot. Maybe we can work something out." "You mean like withdrawing your fraudulent violation notice?" "It's not fraudulent. The architectural standards don't apply to grandfathered structures with valid permits. I can email you the relevant statute if you'd like." Her voice cracked completely. "Dan, please, that deck, my husband doesn't know I built it without permits. If the city gets involved, if there's a lien on the house..." And there it was. The real Belinda Thornberry, stripped of authority and fake confidence, revealed as just another suburban cheat trying to avoid consequences while destroying others for imaginary violations. "Here's what's going to happen," I said, my voice carrying the same calm authority I'd used on construction sites for 3 decades. "You're going to withdraw your violation notice by Friday. You're going to file proper permits for your deck, and you're going to leave me and my shed alone. And if I don't, then Rodriguez processes your violation the same way you wanted him to process mine. Fair is fair, right?" She left without another word, her BMW's engine revving like an angry hornet as she peeled rubber out of my driveway. Probably another HOA violation, come to think of it. Friday came and went, no withdrawal notice. Saturday morning, Chuck appeared at my fence line wearing a grin that could power Christmas lights. "Dan, you beautiful bastard, you gotta see this. Belinda called an emergency HOA board meeting for Monday night. She's not backing down, she's doubling down. Claiming your shed poses a security risk to neighborhood children and might be used for inappropriate activities." My coffee mug hit the deck with a ceramic crack that echoed across the backyard. Inappropriate activities, in a shed containing Christmas angels and rose clippers. She'd just escalated a property dispute into character assassination, suggesting I might be a danger to kids. That was her biggest mistake yet. Monday night's emergency HOA meeting felt like walking into an ambush designed by a suburban sociopath with a PowerPoint addiction. I expected maybe a dozen neighbors. Instead, I found 40-plus people crammed into the Willowbrook Community Center, the air thick with tension and the smell of burnt coffee from a machine that probably predated the neighborhood. Belinda had mobilized her army. She stood at the podium in a navy blazer that screamed, "Trustworthy authority figure," her blonde hair styled to perfection despite the weekend meltdown at my door. She'd recovered her fake confidence, but the tremor in her manicured hands betrayed the desperation underneath. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began with prosecutorial gravitas, "we're dealing with a resident who refuses to prioritize children's safety over personal convenience." The PowerPoint clicked to aerial photos of my property, clearly taken by drone without permission, another privacy violation I mentally cataloged for later. My innocent 8x10 shed looked positively menacing from 200 feet up, especially with Belinda's dramatic red arrows pointing at it like a target. This unsecured structure contains unknown materials and lacks basic safety protocols required for buildings accessible to neighborhood children. I watched Chuck shake his head in the third row while Mrs. Palmer looked genuinely frightened by Belinda's theatrical presentation. Mike Torres, the guy she'd fined for parking his RV, sat in the back with arms crossed, clearly recognizing the same harassment playbook. I let her dig deeper. Furthermore, when board members attempted reasonable dialogue about community safety, this resident responded with threats of legal retaliation and personal attacks on long-serving volunteers. That's when I stood up, my engineer's training kicking in with measured calm. "Belinda, are you referring to when you came to my door begging me not to report your unpermitted deck to the city?" The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead in the sudden silence. Her face flushed scarlet. "That's completely out of context. I was attempting diplomatic resolution by offering to withdraw fraudulent charges in exchange for my silence about your code violations." "Mr. Kowalski, you're out of order," she snapped, her composure cracking like cheap veneer. "This meeting addresses your non-compliant structure, not baseless accusations." I pulled out my phone, opening the email I'd prepared like ammunition. "Would you prefer I read Rodriguez's inspection report on your deck? The one that lists 6 years of unpermitted construction violations?" The murmur that swept through the crowd sounded like hornets discovering their nest had been kicked. Phones emerged as neighbors started Googling property records in real time. But Belinda wasn't finished. She was just getting started. From her briefcase, she produced a thick manila folder that made my stomach drop. The smile returning to her face told me she'd been saving this moment. "I've filed formal complaints with 3 additional agencies regarding Mr. Kowalski's structure. The county health department is investigating potential environmental contamination from improperly stored materials. Environmental contamination from Christmas lights and garden tools. The state fire marshal has been notified about fire safety violations in an unpermitted structure near residential properties. Fire safety violations for a metal shed with nothing flammable except some old tinsel. And I've contacted the IRS regarding potential unreported business income from activities conducted in an unregistered commercial structure." The room spun slightly as the full scope of her nuclear option hit me. She wasn't just trying to get my shed removed. She was attempting to destroy my life with a coordinated bureaucratic bombardment designed to bankrupt me with legal fees, even if I eventually won. The taste of copper filled my mouth as I realized how badly I'd underestimated her willingness to escalate. This wasn't petty HOA harassment anymore. This was systematic character assassination using the full power of government agencies. Chuck stood up, his voice shaking with anger. "Jesus Christ, Belinda. Environmental contamination? The man stores Christmas decorations in there." "That's what he claims," she replied smoothly, back in control now that she'd dropped her bombs. "But official investigations will determine the truth." Patricia Webb, her loyal neighbor, nodded sagely. I've observed suspicious late-night activity around that structure. Unusual sounds, strange smells. I stared at Patricia, remembering last Thursday when I'd retrieved my hedge trimmer at 10 p.m. to cut the bushes blocking her sunset view, as a favor to her. But Belinda wasn't done. She pulled out one final document, her smile now genuinely triumphant. I've also been in contact with Mr. Kowalski's homeowner's insurance company. They're very interested to learn about unpermitted structures that could void his coverage entirely. That's when I understood the true scope of her strategy. She was trying to make it impossible for me to fight back by threatening my home, my finances, and my legal standing simultaneously. As the meeting dissolved into chaos, Belinda gathered her materials with the satisfied air of someone who'd just executed a perfect assassination. Walking to my truck under the parking lot's harsh security lights, I realized I'd been thinking too small. Belinda Thornberry wasn't just a neighborhood bully. She was a predator who used bureaucracy as a weapon, and I was about to become her biggest mistake. The bureaucratic blitzkrieg began at 6:47 a.m. with the sound of multiple trucks rumbling down Maple Drive like an occupying army. I watched from my kitchen window as a parade of government vehicles parked outside my house. County Health Department, State Fire Marshal, Building Code Enforcement, and one unmarked sedan that screamed federal authority. The smell of diesel exhaust mixed with my morning coffee created an oddly appropriate atmosphere for what felt like a coordinated raid on my Christmas decorations. Mr. Kowalski? The health department inspector looked like she'd rather be anywhere else on Earth. We're here about potential environmental contamination from hazardous materials storage. I walked her to my shed, opened the door, and watched her face cycle through confusion, embarrassment, and barely contained anger as she surveyed Sarah's clay pots, boxes of Christmas lights, and one bag of organic potting soil so old it had probably fossilized. Sir, the complaint mentioned chemical storage and unusual odors. I'm seeing garden tools. That's because someone filed a false report, I said, handing her photographs I'd prepared of every item in the shed. But you probably figured that out already. The fire marshal had a similar reaction to my alleged improperly stored flammable materials, which consisted of some old newspapers I used for wrapping Sarah's ceramic angels each winter. By noon, I'd watched 7 government employees waste their morning investigating claims so obviously fraudulent that several apologized before leaving. The building inspector actually shook his head in disgust as he climbed back into his truck. But the real show started when Rodriguez arrived for the electrical inspection. Dan, he called as he approached my shed. I need to document these alleged fire hazards from your electrical connections. What electrical connections? He stopped walking, clipboard frozen midair. The complaint says you've got unpermitted electrical work creating fire risks for neighboring properties. I pointed to my shed. Rodriguez, that building has no electricity, no outlets, no wiring, no connection to the grid. It's about as electrical as a cardboard box. His face went through several interesting color changes as he processed this information. Someone filed a complaint about electrical hazards in a building with no electricity? Gets better. Want to guess who filed it? That's when Rodriguez told me something that transformed my irritation into white-hot rage. Dan, I need to tell you about my conversation with Mrs. Thornberry yesterday. She didn't just file this complaint. She offered to pay for expedited inspections, cash money, $500 to have your property inspected immediately. The afternoon heat suddenly felt arctic as the implications hit me. She tried to bribe you? Oh, it gets so much better. Rodriguez's voice carried the tone of a man who'd seen too much corruption in small-town politics. When I explained that's not how city services work, she asked if there was any way to ensure thorough compliance enforcement for problem residents. Meaning? Meaning she wanted me to find violations whether they exist or not. She was asking me to manufacture code violations to force you out of your home. I stood there in my backyard, surrounded by Sarah's roses and the peaceful suburb we'd chosen for retirement, listening to a city inspector describe an attempt to corrupt municipal services for personal revenge. That's when my engineering brain shifted into a different mode entirely. For weeks, I'd been playing defense, responding to Belinda's attacks, documenting her lies, defending my legal shed against fraudulent complaints. But engineers don't just solve problems, we build solutions. And I just realized that Belinda Thornberry had handed me the blueprint for the most elegant solution of my career. Rodriguez, I need you to document everything she just told you. Every bribery attempt, every request for manufactured violations, every false complaint. Can you do that? Already started, he grinned, tapping his clipboard. Attempted corruption of city officials is a felony, Dan. She just escalated this from HOA harassment to criminal activity. After Rodriguez left, I sat on my back deck with a beer and Sarah's photo, watching the sun set over the neighborhood where we'd planned to grow old together. The scent of evening roses filled the air, mixing with the distant sound of dinner preparations from surrounding houses. "You know what, honey?" I said to Sarah's smiling face in the photograph. "I think it's time to stop playing by Belinda's rules and start playing by engineer rules." That evening, I made 3 phone calls. First to my lawyer, Janet Wu, about documenting a criminal conspiracy. Second to Chuck about borrowing his nephew's excavation company. Third to the city planning department about agricultural exemptions for underground construction. If Belinda wanted to escalate this beyond reason, I was about to show her what a structural engineer with nothing left to lose could build when someone tried to destroy his wife's memory. Time to go underground. The phone call that changed everything came from Janet Wu at 8:23 a.m. on a rainy Thursday, her voice carrying that particular excitement lawyers get when they smell a career-making case. "Dan, you need to sit down. I've been digging into Belinda Thornberry's background for the criminal conspiracy case, and what I found is absolutely delicious." I poured coffee with one hand, cradling the phone with the other, listening to rain drum against Sarah's kitchen windows like nature's own drum roll for whatever bombshell Wu was about to drop. Good delicious, or I need a drink at 8 a.m. delicious? Depends on whether you're Belinda. Remember how she's been HOA president for 6 consecutive years? Unfortunately burned into my memory. Well, her election in 2018 was legally invalid. State law requires 60% of homeowners to participate in HOA elections for them to be binding. She won with only 23% turnout, which means her entire presidency is fraudulent. My coffee mug froze halfway to my lips, steam curling up like incense at an altar of justice. Fraudulent how? Fraudulent as in every fine she's issued, every rule she's enforced, every decision she's made over 6 years has 0 legal authority. She's been playing neighborhood dictator with fake credentials. But Dan, that's not even the best part. The sound of papers shuffling through the phone mixed with rain against glass as Wu gathered her evidence like a prosecutor preparing for the trial of the century. I pulled the HOA financial records. Public information. Thank God for sunshine laws. Belinda's real estate company has received $47,000 in administrative fees from the HOA budget over 4 years. Payments she authorized to herself without board approval. She's been stealing from the neighborhood? Self-dealing, embezzlement, breach of fiduciary duty. It's like a white-collar crime sampler platter. She's been paying herself from everyone's HOA dues while having no legal authority to make those decisions. I set down my coffee and walked to the window, staring out at my shed through rain-distorted glass. The irony was beautiful. She'd been terrorizing me over a legal structure while running an illegal operation from her own house. "Woo, there's more, isn't there? I can hear it in your voice." "Oh, you know me too well. Chuck's wife Monica helped me cross-reference property records. Belinda owes $89,000 in back taxes on 3 rental properties. Those HOA payments have been the only thing keeping her from foreclosure." The rain intensified, creating a symphony of justice against my windows as the full scope of Belinda's desperation crystallized. She hadn't been harassing me over property values. She'd been protecting a criminal enterprise that was her financial lifeline. So when I threatened to expose her deck violations, "You threatened her entire house of cards. Dan, you weren't just another victim. You were an existential threat to a woman who'd been stealing from 68 families to avoid bankruptcy." I pressed my palm against the cool window, watching rivulets of water trace random patterns down the glass. Somewhere across this peaceful neighborhood, Belinda Thornberry was probably drinking her morning coffee, unaware that her 6-year reign of terror was about to end with the precision of a controlled demolition. What's our timeline? She doesn't know we know yet, which gives us a huge advantage, but desperate people make desperate choices, and she's getting more reckless by the day. The bribery attempt with Rodriguez shows she's running out of conventional weapons. Perfect, because I'm about to give her a target so big, so provocative, that she'll make every mistake we need her to make. What kind of target? I smiled, watching my reflection in the rain-streaked window, a 58-year-old widower who'd just discovered that sometimes the best defense is an absolutely spectacular offense. The kind that involves excavators, concrete trucks, and teaching a fake president what real authority looks like. Dan, that smile in your voice is terrifying. Not terrifying, Wu, just engineering. Time to build something beautiful. The blueprint for my revenge started with a 2 a.m. Google search, and the kind of eureka moment that makes engineers cackle like mad scientists. Agricultural exemptions, underground construction, residential zoning. What I discovered, hunched over my laptop with Sarah's reading glasses perched on my nose, I still couldn't put them away, was beautiful in its elegant simplicity. My property had never been rezoned from its original 1960s agricultural designation, meaning Belinda's HOA covenant sat on top of agricultural zoning like lipstick on a pig. Underground storage facilities, emergency storm shelters, workshop spaces, root cellars. The list of permissible agricultural construction read like a revenge menu, each item completely exempt from HOA oversight. I called Chuck at 6 a.m., excitement overriding social boundaries and common sense. Chuck, I need Rico's excavation crew and I need them yesterday. Dan, it's 6 in the goddamn morning. Are you having a mental breakdown? The opposite, brother. I'm having a breakthrough. How big can Rico dig? Underground? Jesus Christ, what are you planning? Justice, Chuck. Beautiful, perfectly legal, absolutely untouchable justice that's going to make Belinda shit herself sideways. Rico's office smelled like diesel fuel and possibility. A double-wide trailer surrounded by heavy equipment that looked like metallic dinosaurs waiting to reshape suburbia. Rico Martinez had spent 20 years moving mountains for developers who thought small. I was about to think very, very big. Mr. Kowalski, Chuck says you want to go underground. How deep we talking? I spread my hand-drawn plans across his desk, sketched with the precision that comes from 3 decades of building things that don't collapse when politicians get involved. 8 feet deep, 2,200 square feet, reinforced concrete walls, full HVAC, electrical, plumbing, emergency exits. The whole 9 yards. Rico's eyebrows climbed toward his hairline. Sir, this isn't a basement. This is an underground mansion. You building a doomsday bunker? I'm building a workshop that no HOA president in America can regulate, complain about, or even see from street level. The beauty of underground construction hit me like religious revelation. Belinda could file complaints about above-ground eyesores until her manicured fingers bled. But try regulating something that exists entirely below her line of sight. Try calling the cops on architectural violations for a structure invisible from every window in the neighborhood. Timeline? 6 weeks maximum. Construction starts the day Belinda leaves for Hawaii. Rico grinned like a man who'd just been handed his favorite kind of chaos. This is either brilliant or completely insane. ¿Por qué no los dos? The permitting strategy required surgical precision worthy of a cardiac surgeon with obsessive-compulsive disorder. Instead of one massive application that might raise red flags, I filed separate permits under different categories, each one perfectly legal and individually boring. Agricultural storage facility, approved by zoning. Emergency storm shelter, approved by building safety. Residential workshop space, approved by permits. Utility expansion, approved by public works. Each permit landed on different desks, processed by different clerks, creating a paper trail so dispersed that no single bureaucrat saw the full scope of what I was building. Government efficiency working in my favor for once in my life. Chuck's wife Monica provided intelligence from City Hall like a suburban deep throat. Belinda's vacation is locked in, 3 weeks in Maui starting next Monday. Her flight lands at 6 p.m. on the 23rd. Perfect. Rico starts digging at 6 a.m. on the 24th. The neighbor recruitment happened over backyard barbecues and carefully casual conversations lubricated by good beer and shared hatred of tyrannical HOA presidents. Mrs. Palmer's son David volunteered electrical work at cost. My mom says that woman made her cry over roses. I do this for free if it makes her pay. Mike Torres offered his truck for material hauling. Belinda fined me for parking my RV on my own property. Whatever you're building, I'm in. Even Patricia Webb, Belinda's former surveillance network, quietly defected during a mailbox encounter that felt like a Cold War spy exchange. Dan, I owe you an apology. Belinda convinced me you were dangerous, that the neighborhood needed protection from you. Water under the bridge, Patricia, but maybe you can help me now. What do you need? Just keep watching, but this time, watch for our team. The technical challenges excited my engineering brain in ways I hadn't felt since designing my first bridge. Underground waterproofing required specialized membrane systems and French drain networks that would make Noah jealous. Ventilation demanded industrial-grade air circulation disguised as innocent landscaping features. But the most beautiful detail was the access system. Concrete stairs descending to a reinforced steel door that would emerge from my backyard like a suburban space hatch, visible only to satellites and very curious birds. The night before excavation, I sat in Sarah's chair with her photograph and a victory beer, looking out at the innocent shed that had started this suburban war. Tomorrow, honey, we dig. Literally. 8 feet down into the earth you loved so much, building something they'll never forget, never control, and definitely never see coming. The shed sat peacefully in moonlight, completely unaware it was about to become ground zero for the most elaborate middle finger ever constructed with proper permits and reinforced concrete. Belinda Thornberry thought she was dealing with a broken old widower. Tomorrow, she'd discover what happens when you mess with an engineer who has nothing left to lose and access to heavy equipment. The symphony of 3 Cat 320 excavators roaring to life at 6 a.m. sharp was better than Christmas morning, a diesel-powered orchestra playing the opening notes of Belinda's Suburban Nightmare. I stood on my back deck with coffee and Sarah's photo, watching Rico's crew maneuver 20 tons of steel precision into position. The lead excavator's bucket bit into earth with a satisfying crunch, lifting the first scoop of what would become 1,800 cubic yards of displaced suburbia. "This one's for you, honey," I whispered to Sarah's picture as hydraulic pistons hissed and diesel engines rumbled. "Time to dig our way to justice." The smell of diesel exhaust mixed with fresh earth as the excavators carved through my backyard with surgical precision. Rico had marked every utility line, every property boundary, every critical measurement with engineer-grade accuracy. Watching him operate that excavator was like watching Michelangelo sculpt David, if David required 8-foot-deep foundations and waterproof membrane systems. By 8 a.m., we had a crater that looked like a suburban asteroid impact. Chuck appeared at our fence line with coffee and donuts, grinning like he was watching the world's most expensive reality TV show. "Dan, I've lived here 8 years and this is better entertainment than cable. You're giving the whole neighborhood something to talk about besides Belinda's latest violation notices." Mrs. Palmer arrived with homemade cookies for the crew, her eyes sparkling with vicarious rebellion as she watched the excavators carve deeper into earth. "My husband built Seoul subway system. He would say your equipment very professional, very impressive operation." Day 3 brought the concrete trucks. 4 massive Kenworth mixers rolled down Maple Drive like a convoy of suburban conquest, each one carrying 9 cubic yards of reinforced concrete that would form the foundation of my underground fortress. The sound of hydraulic pumps and rotating drums created a mechanical symphony that probably violated every noise ordinance in the county, except we were starting at 7 a.m. sharp, perfectly legal construction hours. Rico directed the concrete pour with the precision of a conductor leading the New York Philharmonic. "Steady pour on the north wall, keep that aggregate moving. We get one shot at this foundation, people." The wet concrete smell filled the morning air as liquid stone flowed into carefully constructed forms, creating walls that would outlast Belinda's authority, her fake presidency, and probably her great-grandchildren's ability to remember her name. But that's when the long-distance harassment began. My phone rang at 10:17 a.m., Belinda calling from Hawaii, her voice carrying 3,000 miles of tropical fury mixed with Mai Tai desperation. "What the hell are you doing to my neighborhood?" "Building something beautiful, Belinda. How's your vacation?" "Don't you dare get cute with me. I can see the construction trucks from Google Earth. You're destroying property values with some kind of industrial facility." I watched concrete flow into forms while listening to her long-distance tantrum. "It's an agricultural workshop, fully permitted under existing zoning. Maybe you should have researched agricultural exemptions before declaring war on my shed." Day 5 escalated to bureaucratic bombardment coordinated from paradise. The building code enforcement truck pulled up just as we were setting steel reinforcement bars, number 5 rebar, in a grid pattern that could probably survive nuclear attack if properly motivated. The inspector climbed out looking apologetic and overwhelmed. "Sir, I've got complaints about unauthorized excavation, unpermitted concrete work, and alleged safety violations." Someone's been calling my office every day for the past week. I handed him my permit folder, now thick enough to stop small-caliber bullets, while Rico continued directing rebar placement with the methodical precision of someone who'd built parking structures in earthquake zones. Everything's documented, Inspector. Agricultural storage facility with emergency shelter provisions. Want to see the structural engineering reports? He spent 20 minutes reviewing paperwork that would make Pentagon contractors jealous, then shook his head in professional disgust. Sir, this is the most over-engineered residential project I've ever inspected. Whoever's filing these complaints is wasting taxpayer money. Day 7 brought sabotage that made Navy SEAL demolition look amateur. I discovered the damage at dawn. Construction fencing sliced with surgical precision, sand poured into concrete mixer engines with the efficiency of professional vandalism. But the most revealing detail was the timing. 3:17 a.m. local time, exactly 9:17 p.m. Hawaii time. Boss, Rico muttered, surveying $3,000 in equipment damage. I've built shopping centers in gang neighborhoods with less drama than your suburban paradise. That's when I implemented my counter strategy. Instead of just replacing damaged equipment, I called Detective Palmer and hired Martinez, retired military police who specialized in protecting construction sites from interested parties with destructive tendencies. You want me to babysit a hole in the ground? I want you to document criminal activity for prosecution. Someone's escalating from harassment to felony property destruction. Martinez set up surveillance like he was protecting Fort Knox, complete with night vision equipment and the kind of professional paranoia that makes criminals reconsider their life choices. Day 12 brought the most revealing attack. Coordinated neighborhood pressure funded from tropical paradise. 3 families received identical phone calls offering to cover legal fees for anyone willing to file construction complaints. The script was obvious: environmental concerns, property values, community safety, all copy-pasted from Belinda's harassment handbook. Janet Kim called me directly. Mr. Kowalski, Mrs. Thornberry offered to pay my lawyer bills if I'd sign a complaint against your construction project. What did you tell her? I told her my integrity wasn't for sale and hung up. But Dan? She's getting desperate. Really desperate. By day 15, my underground fortress had walls rising like a concrete cathedral, and Belinda's desperation had reached biblical proportions. The waterproofing phase began with industrial membrane systems that cost more than most people's cars, sheets of modified bitumen and synthetic rubber that would keep my workshop dry during nuclear winter, let alone suburban sprinkler systems. Rico's crew applied each layer with the reverence of monks illuminating manuscripts, knowing that one mistake would mean jackhammering through reinforced concrete to fix leaks. The smell of waterproofing compounds mixed with morning coffee as I watched my underground palace take shape. 16-inch thick walls, steel-reinforced ceiling rated for truck traffic, utility rough-ins that looked like the USS Enterprise's engineering section. Dan, this isn't a workshop, Chuck observed, watching electricians snake conduit through concrete forms. This is a command bunker disguised as a craft room. But Belinda wasn't admiring the craftsmanship from Hawaii. She was coordinating suburban warfare with the efficiency of a general planning D-Day. Day 16 brought environmental protesters, 3 college kids with misspelled signs about environmental destruction, who looked like they'd been hired through Craigslist and briefed through text messages. This illegal excavation is contaminating groundwater, their apparent leader shouted, reading from a script that mentioned industrial pollution and corporate greed. I approached with my permits and the patience of someone explaining physics to flat earthers. Ma'am, what industrial pollution are you protesting? Corporate entities destroying natural habitats for profit. I'm a retired widower building a woodworking shop to honor my deceased wife's memory. Which part of that sounds corporate? They packed up within minutes, looking embarrassed about their $50 per hour activism gig. Day 18 brought the electrical rough-in, miles of 12-gauge Romex cables snaking through concrete walls like copper arteries feeding a mechanical heart. David Palmer, Mrs. Palmer's electrician's son, worked with the precision of a surgeon installing pacemakers. Mr. Dan, your electrical system could power half the neighborhood. Why you need so much juice for woodworking? Because when you build something, David, you build it right the first time. No shortcuts, no compromises. The main electrical panel looked like mission control for the space shuttle. Enough circuits to handle every power tool ever manufactured, plus backup systems that would make hospital generators jealous. But the most beautiful phase was the HVAC installation. industrial fans capable of completely exchanging the underground air every 12 minutes, filtration systems that could handle sawdust or biological warfare with equal efficiency, climate control that would maintain perfect temperature and humidity regardless of surface weather. The sound of air circulation created a mechanical heartbeat that would soon become the soundtrack for neighborhood kids learning that wood could become anything their imagination demanded. Day 20 brought plumbing rough-in that looked like engineering porn. Copper and PEX lines delivering water pressure that could strip paint, waste systems capable of handling a small restaurant, emergency connections that would function during zombie apocalypse. Rico stood in the nearly completed space, hard hat tilted back, surveying our concrete cathedral with professional satisfaction. Boss, I've built foundations for 20-story buildings that weren't engineered this well. This workshop's going to outlast the pyramids. That's when Detective Palmer called with news that changed everything. Dan, we've been monitoring Mrs. Thornberry's phone activity from Hawaii. She's made 47 calls to various government agencies, filed complaints with 14 different departments, and attempted to bribe 3 separate city officials. How do you know about the bribery attempts? Because we've been recording her calls since the 3rd false report. She offered Rodriguez $500 for thorough compliance enforcement and asked if there was any way to find violations that might not be immediately obvious. I stood in my underground workshop surrounded by the fruits of 3 weeks' precision construction, listening to Detective Palmer describe a criminal conspiracy orchestrated from a beach resort. Detective, when she gets back from paradise, she's going to discover that her harassment campaign failed completely. What happens then? That's when desperate people make their biggest mistakes. And Dan will be ready. Day 21 brought the final concrete pour, the ceiling slab that would transform my excavation into a genuine underground facility. Concrete trucks lined Maple Drive like a parade of suburban conquest as liquid stone flowed overhead, creating a roof strong enough to park aircraft carriers. Rico climbed out of the excavation covered in concrete dust and grinning like he'd just built the 8th wonder of the world. Boss, your workshop is officially weatherproof, earthquake-proof, and Belinda-proof. She can file complaints until her manicured fingers bleed. This baby's built to code and beyond. Standing in my completed underground fortress, listening to HVAC systems hum with mechanical satisfaction, I realized Belinda's vacation was ending in 2 days. Time to show her what happens when an engineer stops playing defense and starts building solutions. What happened next should be taught in law schools as a masterclass in how not to handle criminal investigations while surrounded by witnesses and recording equipment. I haven't filed any false reports, Belinda shrieked, her voice cracking like thin ice under the weight of 3 weeks' worth of documented lies. Everything I've reported has been legitimate community safety concerns. Detective Palmer smiled with the professional warmth of a shark smelling blood. Mrs. Thornberry, would you like to revise that statement? Because I have recordings of you offering to pay neighbors legal fees for filing complaints against Mr. Kowalski's construction project. The gathering crowd, now including Mrs. Palmer with her phone camera, Mike Torres recording from his driveway, and at least 15 neighbors drawn by the drama, watched Belinda's face cycle through emotions like a slot machine hitting jackpot in reverse. That's taken out of context. I was simply trying to coordinate community response to a dangerous situation. Rodriguez stepped forward with his construction inspection logs, the thick folder representing 3 weeks of methodical documentation that would make accountants weep with joy. Ma'am, which part of this construction poses a danger? The reinforced concrete that exceeds residential building standards by 200%, the professional HVAC system with triple redundancy safety features, or the emergency evacuation systems that surpass commercial building requirements? Chuck couldn't resist adding fuel to the beautiful fire. Belinda, the only dangerous thing around here is your mouth and whatever's left of your credibility. That's when she made the tactical error that transformed neighborhood drama into viral social media gold. Fine, you want to know the truth? Her voice carried across Maple Drive like a confession broadcast on suburban radio. I've been trying to get rid of Dan Kowalski since he moved here. He doesn't belong in this neighborhood. His property values are wrong, his truck is too old, and his dead wife's garden shed was an eyesore that needed to go. The silence that followed was so complete, you could hear lawn sprinklers 3 houses away. Mrs. Palmer's phone captured every word as Belinda continued her public self-immolation. I've worked too hard building this community's reputation to let some blue-collar nobody with PTSD and grief issues destroy what I've created. Chuck's jaw dropped. Mike Torres stopped recording to stare. Even Detective Palmer looked impressed by the spectacular nature of Belinda's professional suicide. But she wasn't finished. And yes, I've been president for 6 years without proper elections. Yes, I've paid my company from HOA funds. So what? Someone had to maintain standards while the rest of you lived like animals? Officer Martinez turned to Detective Palmer with an expression that suggested this was either the easiest arrest of his career or the most entertaining confession he'd witnessed in 20 years of police work. That's when I delivered my mic drop moment. Belinda, thank you for that comprehensive confession, but there's one thing you got wrong. She turned to me with the wild-eyed desperation of someone who'd just realized they'd been digging their own grave with their mouth. I'm not blue-collar. I'm a structural engineer who designed half the bridges in this county. My old truck is a classic I restored by hand. And that eyesore you destroyed? I gestured toward the underground entrance rising from my backyard like a concrete monument to persistence. It's been replaced by something that will outlast your fake authority, your criminal enterprise, and probably your memory in this neighborhood. The crowd's murmur of approval sounded like vindication with a suburban accent. Detective Palmer stepped forward with handcuffs and the kind of smile that suggests justice occasionally has a sense of humor. Belinda Thornberry, you're under arrest for filing false police reports, attempted bribery of city officials, embezzlement of HOA funds, and conspiracy to commit criminal harassment. As the handcuffs clicked shut, Belinda's final words echoed across the neighborhood with the poetry of perfect irony. This isn't over. I'll sue every one of you. My lawyer will destroy this whole neighborhood. Ma'am, Detective Palmer replied with professional courtesy, your lawyer is probably going to be very busy with your criminal defense. I'd recommend focusing on that. The crowd burst into applause as Belinda was escorted to the patrol car, her designer vacation outfit clashing beautifully with standard issue handcuffs. Chuck raised his coffee mug in salute. Dan, that was the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. Better than my wedding day. Mrs. Palmer approached with tears in her eyes and her phone still recording. Mr. Dan, you did what we all wanted to do for 6 years. Thank you for saving our neighborhood. As the police cars pulled away, carrying Belinda toward a future that included criminal trials and probably not much real estate success, I stood beside the entrance to my underground workshop. Sarah's final gift transformed into justice with reinforced concrete and proper permits. The smell of fresh morning air mixed with the lingering scent of Belinda's desperation and the sweet perfume of suburban victory. Rodriguez approached with his final inspection report and a grin that could power Christmas lights. Dan, your underground workshop officially passes all inspections. Welcome to your perfectly legal, absolutely untouchable, completely spite-proof new workspace. 3 months later, the sound of children's laughter echoing up from my underground workshop had become the neighborhood's favorite soundtrack. Saturday morning found me teaching woodworking basics to 12 kids from Willowbrook Estates, their eager faces illuminated by professional LED lighting that made my 2,200 square foot space feel like Santa's workshop designed by NASA engineers. The smell of fresh pine shavings mixed with the excited chatter of young voices, discovering that wood could become anything their imagination demanded. Mister? Dan, can you help me with this birdhouse? 8-year-old Emma Palmer held up her project with the pride of someone who'd just discovered fire. Her grandmother watched from the comfortable seating area I'd built along one wall, beaming with the satisfaction of watching her granddaughter learn from someone who understood both craftsmanship and patience. Looking good, Emma. Just remember what we practiced about measuring twice, cutting once. The transformation of our neighborhood had been remarkable. Chuck's wife, Monica, used her returned HOA fees, $1,200 from 6 years of fraudulent assessments, to plant the rose garden Sarah had always dreamed of building. Mrs. Palmer created a community vegetable garden that won the county's beautification award. Mike Torres finally parked his RV wherever he damn well pleased. The new HOA board, led by Chuck's reluctant but honest presidency, focused on actual community building instead of enforcement terrorism. Monthly meetings now featured potluck dinners and project planning sessions instead of violation hearings and character assassinations. Belinda's legal consequences had been swift and comprehensive. Federal charges for mail fraud, those official HOA documents, state charges for embezzlement and filing false reports, plus civil lawsuits from every neighbor she'd terrorized over 6 years. Her real estate license vanished faster than her BMW, repossessed along with her house when the IRS liens finally caught up with reality. Patricia Webb, her former surveillance coordinator, now served as the workshop's volunteer safety monitor and had become one of my most reliable allies in teaching kids the difference between power tools and actual power. "Dan, you've got a visitor," Chuck called from the workshop entrance, his voice carrying that particular excitement reserved for good surprises. I looked up from helping Tommy Martinez learn proper sanding technique to see Janet Wu descending the concrete stairs, carrying a briefcase and wearing the smile of someone delivering excellent news. "Counselor, what brings you to my underground empire?" "Good news and better news. The good news is that Belinda's plea bargain was finalized yesterday. 18 months federal prison, full restitution to all HOA victims, and permanent prohibition from holding any homeowners association position. And the better news? 3 other neighborhoods have contacted me about hiring you as a consultant for HOA reform. Apparently, word travels fast about engineers who know how to handle suburban tyrants." The kids gathered around as Wu explained how my case had become a template for fighting HOA abuse across the county. Emma Palmer raised her hand with the solemnity of someone asking the most important question in history. "Mr. Dan, are you famous now?" "Not famous, sweetheart. Just someone who learned that sometimes the best way to solve a problem is to build something beautiful." That evening, after the last young woodworker had been collected by proud parents carrying handmade treasures, I sat in Sarah's memorial corner of the workshop, her photo surrounded by the clay pots and tools that had started this whole adventure. The underground space hummed with contentment, climate control systems maintaining perfect temperature, air circulation carrying the lingering scent of sawdust and young ambition, LED lights casting warm shadows across workbenches that would serve the next generation of neighborhood builders. "We did it, honey," I whispered to Sarah's picture. "We built something they can't tear down, can't regulate, and definitely can't ignore." The workshop hosted its first annual scholarship ceremony the following month, the Sarah Kowalski Memorial Fund, providing woodworking tools and community college tuition for kids who showed passion for building beautiful things with their hands. Chuck's toast at the celebration captured the neighborhood's sentiment perfectly. To Dan Kowalski, who proved that sometimes the best revenge is living well, 2,200 square feet underground, completely legal, and absolutely beautiful.
You know, Dan's story. It really gets to the heart of something I see over and over again in these HOA cases. That $500 fine Belinda slapped on him wasn't really about the shed. It was about testing him, seeing if he'd just run over and pay up like anyone else has been doing for 6 years. What strikes me about this whole thing is how methodical that was. Guy's an engineer, right? So when she came at him with fake authority and made up rules, he didn't get emotional. He got systematic. Started pulling permits, researching agricultural exemption, documenting everything she did. 2,200 square feet underground. Can you imagine Belinda's face when she got back from Hawaii and saw that concrete entrance rising up from his backyard? The thing is, people like Belinda, they count on you not knowing the rule better than they do. They count on you being too tired, too busy, too intimidated to fight back properly. But when someone actually takes the time to understand what they are dealing with, when they have the patience to build a real response instead of just getting angry, that changes everything. Have you ever dealt with someone in your HOA who thought the rule only applied to other people? I'd be curious to hear what's happened in your situation. And if that approach to handling this kind of thing resonates with you, well, there are a lot more stories like this one. Hit subscribe if you want to see how other people have handled HOA overreach in their neighborhoods. Sometimes the best response to a bully isn't the loudest one.